longtime friend, the Carl Jung, some people say, of psychologists in the real estate investing and wholesaling space, has a few psychology degrees, which I absolutely love. Rafael Cortez, man, good to be chatting with you, and even better to be hanging out last month in Tampa.
Oh man, it was a blast. Yeah, thank you for having me, man. Appreciate it. It's an honor.
A pleasure and a privilege. The very first event I went to for InvestorFuse was, I believe it was 2016, and it was a Sean Terry conference. And that was the first time that I got
Mhm.
exposed to who you were and everything like that when you spoke about the different seller personality types, which we're going to talk about today, just to get an understanding. But the first time I saw you speak there, when I was just working as a, like pretty much like selling, like had a table for InvestorFuse and everything like that. And it's funny because like
Yeah.
Nick Perry and a lot of people there that I met that had InvestorFuse accounts. That's the first time I met a lot of them there at that event, including
Dude,
you.
that weekend was insane. I mean, there was so many people in that conference that weekend specifically that just branched out doing, a whole bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Batch was there.
I
That's
met
one of
Eva
the
there,
first
yeah.
people. Yeah, I mean, they blew up. Nick Perry was, I mean, there was a whole bunch of, people over the weekend over there, and it was just amazing. It's crazy to see fast forward, a few years, and all these people are crushing it. So
Mm-hmm. Fast
yeah.
forward like 5 years, but yeah, I left that. You were one of the many people that I was super impressed with, just getting to see how they move and operate from just being a wholesaler locally in Baltimore to pretty much working as a consultant full time, doing investor views and seeing companies all across the country. So I was like, man, this guy Raphael, I got to go introduce myself and talk to this guy. Of course, was really really kind and nice, and have got to connect. Stay in touch digitally, and then meet a couple times up in person. Like we were just at an event, and I went to your and Brent and Batch's office at the end of 2019 when I was out there for a mastermind. So very big fan of Raphael's, and he's now coaching with Wholesaling Inc. as well, which we have all the Wholesaling Inc. coaches on. Amazing program there that's helped out thousands and thousands of investors, and just and most importantly are really good people. So very happy to have you on, man, and always good to be chatting with you.
Cool. No, thanks for the invite, man. Again, I appreciate it.
Yeah. So give an update, man, before we talk about Sean Terry days and working with him and working out of the same office with the Batch people and Brent, which are just amazing, super smart people in this space. Um, what is everything that you have going on now? I mentioned the coaching. You got an active real estate business. Give us a snapshot of that.
So I've always had multiple things running at once. Even back then, when I was doing acquisitions and when we met back in 2000. Real estate. So now I own a brokerage. I'm in Maricopa County, which is Phoenix. I'm in the Phoenix market primarily. I do marketing throughout the U.S. and whatnot, but our backbone market is it's still Maricopa County. And I own a brokerage here. Then I have my wholesale business, which we cherry pick and then do fix and flip, that sort of thing, right? And I'm also an organizational psychologist, which it's business psychology, and I have my practice through CEO Pulse. But yeah, between those three businesses, I mean, I stay pretty busy, pretty consistent. Then I have my education programs, which are focused on real estate wholesaling. That's the wholesaling business blueprint. But yeah, I have a couple of projects going on, usually at all times. So stay.
And just for the personal side as well, living in the Phoenix area, wife,
Right.
kids. I believe the oldest son of yours almost made you shed a tear because he started getting interested in learning about wholesaling. He
Oh,
also
he's
is about your size now, can wrestle you around a good bit.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, man. He actually joined the wrestling team, but he started cold calling over the summer. He's 14 years old, and he walks up. He's like, "Hey, Dad, how can I be your student?" And I mean, I try to play it cool. Honestly, I try to like, yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. You have to go through this process, and then I mean, you got to be, make sure that you're worthy and you're gonna put in the effort and do. So I was trying, I was doing kind of rolling in my own BS there for a little bit, but on the inside, man, I just wanted to scream and cry. I was like, yes, my kid wants to listen to what I got to say.
That's amazing.
But no, it was a pretty cool moment. So he actually went through all my training, the online program, and did the setup. So he runs his own little wholesaling operation now. Like he's actually cold calling going into it, and he's 14 years old, man. And I'm so proud of that kid. It's just insane.
Yeah, dude, that's amazing. And I know a couple guys just off the top of my head, Phil Shaw, who's in our mastermind, and Noah Altavaro. They're both in Florida actually, but they brought on their sons that I want to say are like 18 to 21 range that are
Right.
acquisitions managers for them now. So they're actually doing like driving for dollars, cold calling the list. So it's amazing to see even a 14-year-old, like a freshman in high school, is doing that with his summer instead of doing what was I doing, getting ready for high school soccer team and God knows what, but that's amazing when you were telling me that a couple months ago.
Well, it does a couple of things, right? I mean, I focus a lot on the mindset. And one thing that I've seen, for example, he's and I'll use him as an just a case study, right? But he's a very big introvert, so he's the quiet type. He keeps to himself. And then doing stuff like this, exposing himself to like the whole process of building his own business at 14 years old, and then going through the rejection and all the challenges and all that stuff that you get when you cold call. It's really just giving him that much more confidence. And I see it, like I see it in him, which is, I mean, honestly, it's one of the biggest, coolest things that, can happen. You just get rewired as you start going through through this process, especially if you do it at a young age, like
Mhm.
these 14, 15, 16, 17. I have students, 18-year-old students, that go through the process, and they lock up their first deal, and it's just, I mean, you see the
Mhm.
click immediately. It's just rewiring of the whole belief and the thought process. So I love
Mhm.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. Well, let's dive a little bit into your background because I think that molds a lot of what you have going on today. But how did you get into real estate already? We've already done some foreshadowing of working with Sean Terry. That's how I learned wholesaling, pretty much just through his podcast and free resources
Yep.
there in end of 2013 into 2014. So yeah, would love to hear this. And I know that you're a serial entrepreneur. You've bought and sold businesses, so you have an awesome story and background.
Yeah, no, thanks. I appreciate you putting that out there. And so I became a fireman when I was 19 years old, and through that process, through the firefighter years, I figured. I mean, we had 24 on, 24 off on shifts, right? And then we had like 4 or 5 days that we were completely off. So there was a lot of time there, and like we can do something. We can do something. My captain and I sat down one day, and we just started kind of brainstorming on a few ideas, and I ended up building a non-emergency medical transportation business, which is an ambulance company. So I launched that when I was 21, really kind of picked up traction when I turned 23, and that's when I got my first paid client and whatnot. I was still in the fire department at this time, but I ran that. I sold that in 2014. And when I launched, it was early 2007. So I had it for just about 8 years. And during that time, I started looking at other stuff, right? So I built the company out. I bought one vehicle and bootstrapped the whole thing and whatnot. But I started getting more vehicles in, more people in. Eventually, built out a fleet, and I had a bunch of. I mean, I had a lot of employees. And then I figured I wanted to do something that wasn't drawing up all my energy and my time. It was a lot of people to deal with, and not particularly the model that I wanted to operate.
Mhm.
So I started doing a fix and flip in the meantime, because I had some cash I was sitting on, and eventually the first couple of properties that I flipped, I mean, I'm lucky to say that I didn't really lose on him, right? Like either broke even or made 1,000. I think on the first three properties, like the total tally profits were like $2,500 or something. I
Mhm.
mean, it was just like barely made it. But I got the bug, and then I started looking. I started getting properties on email lists. And I didn't know what wholesaling was. At that point, I just knew how to swing a hammer,
Mhm.
because I had worked construction throughout my high school years and college and whatnot. So I started buying properties from these people who send them to me via emails, right? Like, and then I figured out, the on the settlement statement, you would see this big amount, this assignment fee. Like, how is this guy making $10,000-$15,000 on this property, and I got
Mhm.
to flip it, and I only made 10?
Mhm.
And or made the same, or maybe just a little more and whatnot. Anyways, I got into it. Eventually, I like came, I figured out. I sat down with one of these guys, and he goes, "Yeah, man, we just go direct to seller. We look for properties," and he just kind of gave me the skinny. And I started looking up information about it, and came across Sean. He was well, actually, Todd Toback was the first one I heard in wholesaling, and then Todd Toback had Sean Terry on, I think, third or fourth episode or something like that. But Sean was out of Maricopa County. So I was in Maricopa County, and then found Sean. I started listening to him. I closed a couple of wholesale deals like that, and I got into his email list. So it came down to the point where I sold, I got ready to sell the property, or I'm sorry, sell my business, the transportation business, and I decided I want to go all into real estate. He, like, along those that time frame, he sent out an email looking for an acquisitions guy. I was like, well, I mean, I haven't worked for anybody in the last 10 years, so. But I mean, if I'm gonna get exposed and go to a company that's not mine, like, I want to get challenged. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so I sent in a video. There was a lot of people who applied and whatnot, and I ended up making the cut. Stay there for the next just about 3 years with him. Mm-hmm. So I mean, it was a big learning experience, because that was at the end of all that marketing that was going on, the seller appointments. At this time, I got back into, I was going to university and working my degrees for organizational psychology and doing a lot of things, along those lines, but I sold the original business. So all I was, eating and drinking and dreaming about was real estate mostly.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. I mean, yeah, you started a business, you bootstrapped a business at a young age. So I'm not surprised the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree there with your son, and more of an introvert, already doing cold calling and stuff like that. What was it like working with Sean out of the gate, and how much were you able to apply what you were learning with psychology, which I know this is a little bit of a rhetorical question or an implied question here, but like, what was it like working with Sean as far as what you were doing? You mentioned acquisitions manager while you were also finishing up degree. What was that like?
I mean, I can tell you that it cut my learning curve for 10, 15 years, just because of the amount of exposure that I was getting. And it was a really cool time period. I mean, I was putting a lot of work in, right? Going to school and then learning the theoretical aspect of human behavior and business, the ins and outs and all that stuff. I had my bachelor's in business management, and then I got a master's in psychology. Then I jumped into that second master's degree for organizational psychology. So it just kind of tied everything together, and I was exposed to seller appointments. So every single time, I mean, we'd go through, something theoretical that you read in a book at university, and then see it the next day when you're sitting across the table from my seller. I mean, that's gold right there. And I was going on average, 5-6 appointments a day, face-to-face appointments, Monday to Friday, Saturdays too. I mean, sometimes. And so the exposure level was just there, like putting in the reps. I think that was the biggest thing. So it was a very, trial by fire type of experience. And I mean, totally worth it. I do it all over again.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one thing I think that you could probably hit on briefly, of someone starting their own wholesaling or really a direct to seller marketing company, doing all the appointments, versus joining someone potentially as like an acquisitions or a lead manager, getting a ton of experience, not necessarily in some situations have to worry about a burn rate with you putting up your own dollars for marketing, versus someone just putting you onto appointments and getting a cut of the closed deals.
Man, it's one of the biggest challenges that I see, especially with students. You have to find a way to cut the learning curve. Right now, the market is moving so fast. Competition it's vicious out there. Any market that you tap into, there's going to be somebody else, or a bunch of other people doing, trying to wholesale and do the same thing. The barrier to entry is low. When you're talking about wholesaling, okay, it's not easy. It's not one of those industries where you come in and then you can just thrive, for sure, 2-3 months into it. Some people take, 8, 9, 10 months to get a first deal through the door, but that's because of the learning curve, right? And then what happens, there's a lot of rejection. I mean, when you're calling, when you're reaching out to people, we're looking for a very specific sector of the population who wants to sell. Okay, so it's a very small group of people who are actually going to be the right person for us to do business with. And what that means is that most people are going to be saying no. And then people get just emotionally battered with rejection and no's and all that stuff, and the consistency starts dropping. So the reason I'm saying all of this is because it's one thing to consider. Find a way to cut the learning curve. Either go work for somebody that already has a running business and that's willing to take you under the wing, coach you, and it's going to be in their best interest too, because if you're in acquisitions and trying to lock deals, like that's how they make the revenue. But they're going to walk you through the process, right? And then more importantly, they're going to hold you accountable for long enough that you start building habits. That's the biggest thing. You got to build habits. You got to build a habit of having conversations out there and being, not necessarily being pretentious or in the sense of outgoing or anything like that. It's just, building the habit of consistently reaching out to people, follow-ups and that sort of stuff. So as you're coming into it, if you're a solopreneur, and you're building up the company without any guidance, you go to YouTube University and you're trying to learn everything through videos and the process. All the pieces are going to be there, right? But the order of things is not. The order of things is going to be off. So I think that's where a lot of the confusion takes place. And people have to worry about, okay, do I register an LLC? Do I do this? Do I do that? What do I do with accounting? How do I set up my systems? What do I use to blast this out? How do I have the conversations? How do I negotiate? How to run comps? How do I do this? I mean, there's so many different things that play into it that you can bypass all that noise if you go cut the learning curve somehow. Either go work for somebody, and I'm biased about this, but go pay for somebody to teach you what they know. It's really, it's not an expense. It's an investment. It's either on time or money, one of the two. But if you want to be successful, you can't. The industry moves too fast. You know what I mean? To be able to catch up. Like people could 10 years ago, or like it's not more PPC, all that stuff. It's was rolling out and people could take a little bit more time understanding it. Now you can't. Why? Because algorithms change all the time. Hell, I think last year we had ringless voicemail. That was the thing, right? I mean, that lasted a whole 10 months before it got super red flagged and just complicated to do. Same thing, SMS. So the ways of marketing, finding sellers moves fast. You just have to be fast enough, to stick to it.
100% agree. And this may be spoken most directly, at least this portion, to people that are at 0 deals, maybe like 0 to 1 or 0 to 5 deals as far as cutting the learning curve. 100% agree on not only cutting the learning curve, but staying on top of trends. A lot of people pay all these money into masterminds, 25K, 15K, 30K plus a year, essentially just to stay on top of trends and things like that. For my own, for a glance into my own personal life and kind of like limiting mindset versus abundant mindset, I'm looking to join this one guy that's starting like a crypto NFT blockchain mastermind. Part of the reason, I don't know the price tag on it yet, but part of the reason I'm most likely going to be willing to pay an uncomfortable amount for me is because I know that I don't want to delegate a lot of time into learning NFTs and crypto. I just started buying crypto at the end of last year and it just sits there passively, but I don't want to go down a rabbit hole of learning all this stuff. I'd rather pay somebody for exactly what Raphael is saying, and then I can just put money into other crypto coins and NFTs and things of that nature and still focus on my one main thing. So I 100% agree and echo what Raphael said as far as just cutting the learning curve drastically. That mixed with also kind of the psychological aspect, what I said before of not worrying about the burn rate for your own marketing. Like, I think that's going to put a little bit of a pressure, whether how much you consciously realize or not. But I think both of those together are absolutely huge in deciding if you want to start this up by yourself or potentially work and handle a segment of leads for somebody that's already established, is a good person that you've vetted out to some degree and is actually doing transactions in your, local or I guess virtual market, especially with how things are set up on Zoom right now.
Yeah, absolutely agree, man. 100%. You have to dig the trench somehow, some way. There's just no way around it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I want to hear a little bit, because the first exposure I got to you was talking about the different seller personality types. I'd love somewhat of a quick overview of the different seller personality types that you presented on back in the day. And of course, give an update to how, if at all, they have changed since then, and how you're applying it in your own business, working with sellers and with all your students with Wholesaling Inc. and everything.
Yeah, I'd love to. So the personality types, right? It can be one of those things that sounds very, very confusing, but it's actually fairly simple to kind of categorize. So you don't have to have you don't have to be a psychologist to understand human communication, right? We pick that through instinct. We pick that up through instinct, intuition. We have context in conversations, and when you walk into a room and if you feel if you're vibing with somebody. What's happening, it's not you're reading their mind. What's happening is that your subconscious is reading their body language. And you're reading, what they're presenting, to you. A simple closing gesture on, with in body language can tell you a lot, right? When you're having a conversation with somebody, and it's about understanding where to pick up those little nuggets and read between the lines. Now, one thing that I started doing very early on, and I think it was the reason why I my closing ratio was pretty high. It still is, and that's it. It's just understanding communication. And what I mean by that, a simple way to kind of frame it is going through the DISC assessment. People do DISC for hiring and to understand what how people are and whatnot. I think going, a few levels deeper and understanding how to read somebody, not necessarily by them taking the assessment, but by you looking at them, listening to how they're speaking, and understanding their tonality, understanding, what they're really saying in between the sentences, is going to help you, close a lot more deals. Why? Because every single person has a language, right? People are analytical, they're supportive, they're interactive, or they're drivers. Those are sort of the main 4 buckets for DISC. And there's a lot of subcategories. There's a lot of sub behaviors, behind or below those. But you don't need to understand all of that stuff just to have a good, solid conversation with somebody or understand how they communicate. So, and I have a really small, short PDF, which I train the cold call. My whole team gets trained on behavioral tendencies. I can send that to you, and you can put it up if you want on the a link. I'll send you a link of that. But definitely. It's basically what it is. It's for example, if you're talking to somebody who's a driver, right? They're going to be the tonality. It's going to be direct. They're usually concerned about going straight to the bottom line, and they don't care much about building, rapport or having a long conversation about, what happened over the weekend and whatnot. Some people do need that. High drivers. Usually don't. And the way that you recognize a high driver is they're very dynamic when they speak. They're very authoritative, when they're speaking. They have almost an abrupt way of presenting things. And when you recognize a driver, like what you do is you actually mirror, and you mirror what they're saying, but the way they're saying things. So if you tend to be this quiet person that's more monotone and controlled, and the demeanor is more laid back, you have to level up your game a little bit and then match them at the same frequency. What happens is that it's the fastest way to build rapport. One, okay, the fastest way to build rapport is not going to be, talking about a football game all, for 2 hours. It's not. It's going to be communicating with them in the way that they communicate. To people. And if it's fast, if it's pace, you have to pick up your pace. Why? Because now you're both playing at the same, same field. One thing that and I say mirroring, right? This is very interesting. When you're building rapport with somebody, people think that, oh, you know what? Now I have a connection because they're telling me about their kids. I have a connection because they're telling me, about what they used to like when they were, little and whatnot. And some people just overshare. One thing that you can count on for building rapport, though, is going to be body language. When somebody starts mirroring, meaning that they start to mimic and your body language, not you doing theirs, but they mimic yours, subconsciously there's a connection attached. So if you're just so you can kind of picture it, if you're sitting at the table, the dinner table with a seller, and you're talking about the deal or negotiating the numbers and whatnot, and you drop a number out there and you lean forward, and they lean forward with you, you still have them. Okay, so they're still engaged in that conversation. But if you lean forward and they lean back, they're pushing back subconsciously from what you're saying. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that, for example, that's the kind of stuff that I used to look for, and I still do when I'm having a conversation with somebody. It's about communication, right? If their body language is pulling away, I know that what I just said, I have to, bring it back a little bit, so I can, have that conversation, or I'm sorry, get them engaged in that conversation again. Does that make sense? But when real rapport, an indication of real rapport is when they start mirroring you. And it's a little bit of a tangent, but I wanted to put that out there. Now, the next one is interactives or influencers. Those people, they're very vivid, they're very dynamic, and they're gonna move their hands a lot. My behavioral profile is a DI. I'm a driver influencer. So I speak loud. I'm dynamic when I talk. Sometimes people think I'm mad just because of my tonality, and it's not. It's just the pace that I move at. And for somebody who's a high I, it's relationships. They're really good about, it's that type of person that you can put in a room, and within 5 minutes, they're going to have 10 friends or people that they've already spoken to and whatnot. So how do you speak to that high I when you're in a seller's conversation? You have to relate to them through experiences. They are the type of people that are going to, need rapport building, not necessarily super focused on the bottom line, but they want to have that connection between the two of you, and you have to match that. So just understand, like when you're speaking to a high, one thing to kind of watch out for too is that have you ever been at a closing table with somebody who says, yes, let's get the deal done, and then you feel like you have that relationship going and everything, and then they just ghost you after that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's probably high I. A high driver will tell you, you know what, never mind, I changed my mind, don't call me again, and boom, they'll cut it off. Usually high I's will there's a need for approval, right? So they won't they'll do anything to push away from rejection, and those are very long conversations that can lead nowhere. So it's important to just kind of gauge which is which. Then you have steadies or supportives, right? Supportives usually have to take it a lot slower, just because they need to have the emotional comfort to come to terms with the decision they're making. So it's a house, right? And that to them means that they're probably going to have to relocate. And, if it's not an owner or absentee owner, they're going to have to relocate. They're going to have to change, something. They're the type of people that are going to be concerned about the neighbors. What's going to happen to this house? Is it going to turn into a nice, pretty property that my neighbors can enjoy? Or is it something that's going to be, flipped and forgotten, or maybe left here until appreciation kicks in? So all of that stuff is going to matter to somebody who's a high S. A high D, a high driver, is not going to give, two craps about, that kind of stuff. They just want the bottom line, right? But high S's is different. The tonality too is a lot more monotone. So what do you do? For example, in my case, I have to dial my pace. I have to dial it down. And not that I'm trying to overly explain anything. It's just getting on their level of communication. If I'm too fast, and if I say too many things at the same time, or one right after another, it's not that they can't process it, but emotionally they're getting overwhelmed. Okay, so high S's get emotionally overwhelmed, and they need their time to process through things like that. And then the fourth one is analyticals, or calculating people. Calculating, compliant, analytical. I mean, it's all the same, but these are the type of sellers that you gotta back up your comps. You gotta have data. You gotta have information readily available, because they are gonna go through the whole breakdown of things. And what do you do? Like, high drivers are not analytical. High I's are not very analytical, unless it's like a learned behavior or something. But for the most part, we don't look at, we just want the bottom line and then like make a decision quick, right? High analyticals, no, they're gonna have to take their time, not because they need to come to terms emotionally with it like supportives do, but because it's got to make sense. Like they have to create this logical track record why it's the right thing to do. And when you the thing about it, Carlos, is that when you understand how to talk to each of these individual behaviors, and you can present your case in the way that you know they're going to understand, it's a lot easier to close. It's a lot easier to build rapport. It's a lot easier to convey the reason why they should be doing business with you. And it's a lot easier to find out what the real problem is from their side, so you can come in and solve it. Usually conversations with high drivers, those appointments, I mean, in and out, 15, 20 minutes, and walk in, have that conversation, walk out with a contract 15 minutes later. An appointment with somebody who's a high S or a high C, those appointments are, I mean, you're talking 2.5 hours, just because of the style of communication that takes place. So if I were to tell you, like, what's the number one thing? Yeah, we all learn scripts, rebuttals, and phrases and transitions and everything. But one thing that really makes a big difference is understanding how people communicate. It's like the best piece of advice that I can give anybody out there who's looking to become a closer.
That's the core of it. The psychology is understanding how yourself operates, which I think is the ultimate 80-20 lever, is understanding yourself, your subconscious programming, but then understanding in other people. I guess for a quick wrap, real quick, an appointment with a D might just be a quick handshake, show them what they would net doing a deal with you versus maybe potentially listing it with a realtor, and the operating costs if the house sits listed on the market for 6 months. And you might have to just really build rapport, be friendly, show that. And then that
with high eyes, think experiences. It's highlight the experience of what can happen if they go through the process. Like find out what the real problem is. And this is exactly how I approach. And you're right about the high Ds. It's bottom line driven. Okay. High eyes. It's okay. You've been, for example, the first one I can think of right now, it's a gentleman. He was very high eye. He really wanted to sell, and then go on this, just buy an RV and then travel throughout the United States. That was his thing. But his secondary was a high S. So he was an IS. He was very people oriented, not necessarily bottom line driven. But we have a dominant and a secondary, right? We have all of them, but we have two that usually kind of bubble up to the surface. I'm a DI. This gentleman was an IS. So the thing with him was to help him see the possibilities with the experience. Hey, listen, you want to sell this. This is what can potentially happen down the line. We got that lead via pre-foreclosure. So of course, we went down the whole, road of, you're going to save your credit, you're going to do this, we're going to come in, we're going to close, all the features and benefits. We said it, we put it on the table, it was there. But what made it, stick was what really, got him to decide to go with us, was because we helped him see the possibilities of him being able to travel. So it's if we hadn't picked that up, if we didn't know that was one of the things that he was mainly concerned about, or the big desire that he had, we wouldn't have been able to close that. Yeah, but it's experiential with high eyes.
Love that. So true, because I'm like one of the highest eyes is my main thing. I'm ID, so almost the inverse of Raphael. So naturally, Raph is going to be, in general, really, I'll say he's going to be instinctively a pretty significant better closer. If you put me and him in like a sales acquisitions role, he's going to be a better closer. I'm going to kind of care more about like how my relationship with somebody is going to be long-term, and feelings and everything like that. So it's interesting. Me and him are kind of flip-flop there. So for the appointments, you have DI. S is going to be someone that you're probably going to have to talk about what's going to happen with the property after. You're going to get renters in there. You're going to help the neighborhood get better. And then C is probably, or go ahead with the S. Any breakdown on that?
Yeah. So S is, they like to, there's got to be an emotional attachment to the property. And it's not deceit, right? It's just helping them see what matters to them. For example, for a high S, if you come in, if you tell them or if you show them how that property, after the flip, after this, after that, it's gonna, can help a family that's starting out. For example, we're going to do this. We're going to, increase the value of the neighborhood because we're going to flip it to top shape. So the value of your neighbors, it's actually going to go up as well. I mean, they're going to be, they're going to be taken care of and that sort of thing. One thing that this is actually a very, very common scenario. A lot of high S's don't want to have the conversations with their tenants that they need to vacate the property. They don't want to have the conversations with their family. Like high S's are usually the people who will allow their family members to squat on the property for 10 years without getting paid. I'm sure you've seen that before because we've seen it 1,000 times. And it's the reason behind it is it's going to be that difficult conversation that they need to have. So, I mean, it's one problem that we can come in and solve for them. Hey, listen, we'll handle the conversation. We'll be, we'll whatever we need to do on our end to handle that, we will do it. We'll make sure that you don't have to put yourself through that emotional strain, because that's really what they're, afraid of. It's that conversation. So, yeah.
100%. And then the C, what is the C like? You're essentially showing maybe like what an entire HUD statement would look like, defining, every part of the contract and what an assignment is, everything like that.
With high C's, they're usually going to ask you for a little bit of time to make up their mind. High C's are actually the only type of people that we will leave a contract behind because they do want to go through the clauses. And they want to make sure that they have, everything, all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted and everything. They just need their time to process the information. And yeah, for them, I mean, well, you got to run comps. You got to run property analysis anytime you go on an appointment, right? More than likely, you're going to have the same comps. You're going to have the same stuff. And this is how you're going to present it to a high D. Hey, listen, man, I have all the comps right here. This is what it's showing me. And then they're going to be, okay, cool. They're going to take it. They're going to look at it. Maybe glance, through 2 or 3 of the sheets that you have on there, and then they'll put it aside. A high C is going to take those and it's, they're going to look at the beds, the baths. They're going to look at, the condition of the house. They're going to look, so they're going to break all the data down. They're going to be very meticulous about the actual information and everything that you're providing. If you provide something that smells like bullshit to them, and I don't know if I can, be linguistically improper here, but if you feed them some BS, they're going to pick it right up, and then you're going to lose any possibility to rapport with them. So yeah, it's just, for them, you are going to have to sit there a little longer and then explain, give them the logical reason why this makes sense. Okay. That's a breakdown for them.
Got it. Perfect, guys. So we have an idea, this is very foundational, the 4 different types on the DISC analysis, how to work with that. I guess I want to ask a little bit about pre-qualifying, which is going to talk into personality, and then like when or not to go on an appointment for somebody that's listening to this going on physical. And I know there's a bunch of variables that go into that, how many leads you're getting per week, what type of person you're what type of staff, I guess, you have. But speaking to that a little bit, just because so many people are virtual now, what would you say your best advice is here towards the end of 2021, and then we can hop into 2022 plans here?
So 2020, you said best advice for going on appointments or not going? I didn't catch that.
Yeah, I guess kind of just your best insight on pre-qualification, understanding motivation, whether either setting up a phone appointment if somebody's virtual or actually spending the time and resources to go see that person. If you can't read the body language and stuff over a phone.
Got it. Yeah. And the crazy thing, man, is that, 70% of the communication happens through body language. We have a small amount that actually happens. That's genuine communication that happens from the stuff that's actually being said. The rest of it comes from tonality. So we still have access to about 25% of reading between the lines when we talk to somebody on the phone. Again, if you're on the phone, you're looking to a high, or you're speaking to a high D, the tonality is going to be higher. It's going to be dynamic. Same thing for a high I. And then when you're looking, or when you're talking to a high S, it's going to be more monotone, more controlled, and same thing for somebody analytical, right? It's just the people who are high S's, they're people oriented. High Cs, they're both monotoned. They're both controlled conversations, but high Cs are more logic oriented. And high Ds are bottom line. So they're talking about results, when high Is are talking about the sister, the aunt, the uncle, and they're people oriented. So that's how you kind of, separate each one of those when you're talking with them on the phone. That's how you can, have a pretty good, decent idea, fairly quick, what type of person you're talking to. Now, with that being said, we have the way that we work the leads. We source the leads. We have cold callers, we have PPC and all that stuff. Everything goes into a lead manager database, and we have a lead manager that goes in. Then they just my acquisitions people never talk to somebody who's not pre-qualified. So we have sourcing, that's just gauging for interest. They send them into our CRM, and inside the CRM, they'll get pre-qualified by the lead manager. The lead manager is looking for the timeline, the condition, the motivation, and then the price. So we have 4 pillars. I mean, it's not, at this point, it's something fairly common, because we all talk about, the pillars of pre-qualification, right? But you are going to find out the condition of the house, whether or not it's, it's in distress and whatnot. That's not going to be the end all be all. It's just another red flag of whether or not they can move on to acquisitions, right? A lot of people have great houses, but they're behind on payments. The situation is going to be different. So ask about the condition, pre-qualify based on that. And that's one of the 4 pillars. The next thing is going to be the timeline. So ask him, how soon do you need to close? Or when can we come in and close this property? As you're pre-qualifying. If they say within 30 days, it's a hot, they need to move quick. If they say 3 months, 120 days or whatever, like there's more time, right? That lead is not pre-qualified yet. They're not ready to pull the trigger. So we don't send somebody who says 90 days to acquisitions. We keep them in the oven per se, right? The next thing is going to be the motivation. There's different levels of motivation, and the motivation can be situational. It can be, for example, they're going through a divorce, they're relocating. I mean, the motivations are going to be different. It's going to be, you're also going to have financial factors that go into the motivation, but it's not always about the money. Like that's one thing that when I first got into this, I thought everything was about the cash. I thought I had to, give them the highest offers, because that's what I was thinking. Like it's not how they're thinking. I was thinking, with my glasses on. I was thinking with my problems, not looking at their problems. So like I learned not to go into any seller appointment assuming, with any assumptions whatsoever. When I go and show up to a seller's door, I really don't know what's going on. I don't know. That's it. I'm not going to assume that the house is beat up and they need cash, because they can be super wealthy and then just not give a crap about the condition of the house. I've seen that. So learning not to assume is the biggest thing that's helped me diagnose the motivation. Because as you're going through a discovery process and asking them questions and finding out about what the real situation is, why they want to sell, you come up, with different things. So there's going to be people are going to want to sell because they're getting divorced, because they're getting relocated, because they got tired, they have a squatter in the house, and family members they're fighting with. I mean, you name it, man. The motivations are going to be out there. And then the 4th one is going to be the price, right? We give them a range. If they're really pressing for a number, my lead manager does not negotiate deals. But she can give them a range. So we'll give them a range between 70 and 85% if they're pushing for it. Now, if they have 3 out of those 4 pillars, like it's something that my acquisitions person can come in and then just take the rest of the way home. You know what I mean? That's a pre-qualification for us. But we 3 out of 4 sends over to acquisitions, and then acquisitions does their thing. That's how we work the flow of the leads as they're coming in.
Very cool. Well, man, this has been an awesome interview. I want to ask real quick before talking 2022 and any best insight you may have in addition to what we discussed today. What are kind of the resources that someone else could use besides getting a psychology degree or multiple psychology degrees for learning? I know on this show, I've definitely mentioned Pitch Anything and Never Split the Difference, which is some NLP, but just general sales type stuff. Do you have any resources, recommendations in addition to that?
Yeah, I think, and well, I like to not stick to, but I like to highlight the acquisitions. I'm an acquisitions guy. That's my backbone, right? But one thing that helped me out was self perception. Um, to be a good acquisitions, to be a good closer, you have to feel like you're a good closer. It starts with that. And if you haven't closed anything, it can be, somewhat of a hard thing to do, right? Um, but you have to see yourself as a good closer, and there's a methodical process of doing that. One book that really helped me early on was Cybernetics. Um, and is that love it? Yeah,
Classic.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Cybernetics is a really good book on self-image, self-perception, and increasing that level of belief. Like it all starts with you. You can go to all the masterminds, you can go to all the trainings, you can go to all the seminars, and never take action. Usually the action lacks because of a lack in self-belief. Okay, so you have to believe in yourself, at least have a degree of faith that's gonna, start growing and growing and growing as you get better, as you get your first yes, as you get your first appointment, as you get your first signed contract, as you get your first buyer, and then as you get your first paycheck. I can't tell you how many times, man, I see students, my students just come in, and then when they get that first paycheck, it's $15,000-$20,000 in a lump sum. It's just their thought process gets rewired, but it starts with that sense of belief. And I mean, that's really the biggest thing, because when you have that, man, it's everything else just kind of falls into place. You're going to learn the strategies, right? You're going to learn the scripts. You're going to learn the process. You're going to learn the blueprints per se to do anything, but it starts with you at a mindset level.
100%, man. Couldn't agree more. And Cybernetics, I talk about a lot. That's a very foundational book for a lot of mindset and self-image psychology stuff that has been released since then. But it's so, so true as far as just kind of like how you see yourself and how you feel and behave. Kind of goes on autopilot with how you want to program yourself. So I always talk about that's the biggest leverage point that you can work on. And then obviously listening to mechanical operational stuff like Raphael. What does it look like working with you as well? I do have reiwholesaling.com for Raphael's wholesaling blueprint. What does it look like working with you, and who is kind of like your ideal student to bring on?
Ideal student is anybody doing less than 5 deals a month. It's if you're in that stage, right, where you're getting, trying to understand how lead management works, how to actually find the sellers, and at that stage, I mean, it's the wholesaling business blueprint. It's really a process. That's what it does. I'm very linear when it comes to building systems out. And I understood early on that the information can be out there, but the order of things is going to be, going to be subjective, right? To depending on who's looking at it. And what I did, I just laid out, I mean, my business model on a step-by-step, 1 foot in front of the other type of basis. So, the wholesale business blueprint is, it's what I have out there. And we tackle everything, man. We tackle everything from mindset to actual operations, and you inevitably, people get to a point where they want to scale, and then we'll break into that sort of stuff as well. But it's always important, man, to just have a good foundation laid out before you start throwing chaos on it.
100%.
Yeah,
100%, man. Could not agree more. Very quality guy. Always awesome to chat with him. To end things here, man, what does an ideal 2022 look like for, if you're doing the 30-minute visualizations from Cybernetics, what does 2022 look like for you?
2022. Well, by then, it's stuff that I have in the oven right now. I'm building up the software for a CRM standalone software, so that should be out by then. The wholesaling business and the fix and flip business, I mean, we're ramping up. We're ramping that up. We're ramping up the brokerage as well. And yeah, I mean, that's in a nutshell. That's the stuff that I'm focused on breaking into the first 2 quarters of the year. I have a couple of other things laid out for the last 2 quarters of the year. But yeah, I mean, kicking it off right, it's gonna be that.
Love it, man. Love it, man. Might have your son locking up some more deals for you as well there, which is cool to see.
Let's go.
Let's go, man. Well, awesome. And what's the best place to follow you, Raphael?
I'm pretty active on social media. You can find me on Instagram at Rafael Cortez CEO. You can go to my website, rafaelcortez.net, or check out the Wholesaling Business Blueprint at reiwholesaling.com.
Awesome, man. Well, this has been a fun, informative. You guys know I'm going to love it because we talk psychology and mindset a lot of the times, but make sure to give Raphael a follow. And then if you are in that range that he mentioned, highly suggest his coaching if you want to work with a quality person that has a ton of experience and a lot of knowledge. So thanks for checking out this episode, guys, and catch you soon.
Appreciate the invite, brother. It's been fun.
Yeah, brother.